The past couple of weeks, I've been talking about TTRPG, actual play assemble, and kind of what we do. And this all started because Brian mentioned at MagicCon, we should have a talk about what we do, why we do what we do when we produce shows and things like that. So that inspired the whole TTRPG actual play assemble series. The first one was over season and season structure, how to structure those. If you and we used Sid Field's screenplay as kind of an example of 3-act structure. You can have more than 3 acts if you want, and how to break up seasons so they fit within this act structure and what you do at certain points to propel the story forward. Part 2 was world building and characters and using feedback from your players in order to build your campaign. So when someone's a druid and they take a acolyte background, well, were they an acolyte of? Did they have a druid grove? What'd that look like? And that can be what all druid groves look like. The basic structure in your world, and you can change that up, but you have a basis to go on. And we also talk about starting small and then going big from there. Now, you'll want to kind of interchange the starting small thing because you'll want some of your big ideas out there, your gods and things like that, and whatever you like. But also, don't play in every city. Start in the city of your first adventure. Your first adventure, what they go, that's all you should worry about for that episode. And then when the next one comes up, and just leave yourself room because you don't know what your players will do. And you don't want to overwhelm yourself either. You have how many ever episodes you make your season, say 8 to get through. And so just focus on those first before you build out your whole world and get some stuff down, lay some groundwork. So we talked about all that and how to build that into shows and talking to players about their characters and things and building that into your show. And now we're going to talk about actually doing the show with all those things in mind. So go back and watch the previous videos to find out. They're relatively short, about 17-20 minutes in there each. And a lot of what I was talking about has to do with timing. And now we're actually running the show, where timing becomes more critical between if you're the DM and the producer, like I often am, or if you're just the producer. Get a rapport going with the DM and talk about some of those things we've talked about before, in that where are the points of propelling the story forward? Are you going to have a battle? If you have music, is there going to be a key word where I can turn on that music cue for you? How long is the intro and credits to be? Because you want to count in everybody for your intro and have that timing down so they know when they're on screen to go. Know when your breaks are happening, and that's all part of keeping things on time and you helping move the show forward as the DM is moving the story forward, as the players are also helping the DM move the story forward.
Timing is one of those. It's one of those odd things when it comes to actual plays, because a lot of them while this series is looking at things in the structure of a screenplay or the structure of an episodic television show, when you're doing actual plays, generally, unless you are part of a content on a network or a streaming, you're not limited to those times. So you actually don't have to make your show exactly 2 hours or 3 hours long. If you go over a little bit or under a little bit, it's okay. But the reason that knowing that timing ahead of time is so important is that it's really just respecting everyone. It's respecting your players, it's respecting your producer if you have one. It's also respecting your viewers, because some people only slotted out so much time to watch that episode, either live or later on. And it's really, for everybody who's going to be on camera, on screen, knowing exactly how much time they need to slot out and devote to that session is so important.
Yeah. And so you're running the show, and yeah, keep all this in mind. And always, I've said this before in other talks, make sure you have a back chat of some kind to keep up with everything so you know when to break. And, if a keyword's missing or something, you're listening to something, you can quickly message the DM, like, hey, were you going to do this? And, you know, just keep that communication flow going. And if a player needs something or if the DM needs something and you need to stop the show for some reason, back channel way to do that. And and this kind of works into the other point I want to talk about, which brings in player safety. Is that also running the show? That's something I keep in mind too. Is when if you do an X card or however you arranged it beforehand, know when to I need an emergency BRB screen. No, and or when the player goes like when I've done shows before, I tell my players because often I'm the DM and the producer. I'm like, I am very busy. If you need a break and you're giving me cues on screen, I'm not picking up on them. Put them in chat or somebody just say it on screen and let me know, and I will take that break. But my brain is already divided in trying to get pay attention to what you're doing, pay attention to the stream, and then what I need to do. And there's a lot, so I depend upon my players to let me know that I need to take that break, and I always try to make that very clear at the front of it because you might be giving me a cue, and I'm looking at 4 or 5 other people. I just might not catch it because my attention's spread out. And so that's where I need your help to either vocalize or put that in the chat. And, if you put in the chat, I'm still not looking, please say something to me and let me know. And that but player safety is very important. And sometimes you're just going to run into it. And so that's another thing you need to have planned for and timed out. People are more important than the show. So take
Always.
those breaks. What you need. And also to that end, Chaotic Wholesome Presents has this awesome lines and veils chart that they made. I will link that in chat. So yeah, take a
I
look
do
at that.
I do tend to assume most people are familiar with lines and veils. If you are not, they are a sort of easy way for players and a GM to tell each other what kinds of things they are okay with happening in game and what kinds of things they are not. Um, Lines are things that should not be crossed. So it may be a particular fear, it may be a particular situation, it may be a type of interpersonal relationship you don't want with your characters or NPCs. Veils are things that you're maybe a little okay with, but perhaps you would like to have it discussed, like literally discussed off screen, or you'd like a fade to black on something. So it's really nice to have that ahead of, especially when you're talking about an actual play that is a series, where you're going to be sitting down with these people over multiple sessions. You're really going to want to know these as the GM, because when you're planning your session, you may have to make an edit or you may have to just alter things. And it's nice to know that ahead of time. However, sometimes I will say that on the fly, the reason that you want to have a BRB or you want to have like a short break option is sometimes while you're playing, um, people aren't aware of things that cause them distress at the table until they actually happen. And that is why you do have a back chat, or sometimes you have an actual physical sign on screen that somebody can make to say, like, I need a break. So it's nice, but the lines and veils ahead of time will help everybody in their mind start thinking about what kind of stuff they wouldn't want to see in the game. And at the same time, it also helps them understand and maybe better formulate their part in the world of what they do want to see in that world. So it kind of works in both ways.
Yeah, and once that break happens, now we have to adjust the show, which again is perfectly fine. So we need DM and players need time to figure out what adjustments to make when we come back, and then you got to put that in time. So that may change what happens in the next episode. And again, that's okay. It's just another thing you have to keep in mind. If that happens, there you'll change your timing and have to divide things up differently, and a point you want to get to has to be moved. to another time, and you can still probably get to your end point in the season. I talking about pre-planning and having a general idea of your story flow so that you can still kind of get to the same place where you want to get, even though how you got there might be different, and that's fine.
Which when you're playing, I mean, honestly, when you're playing a TTRPG, your destination as the GM is something that you can usually keep fixed, but how you get there changes the moment somebody picks up a dice and rolls it. So, sorry, picks up a die. Don't come for me, grammar people. Picks up a die and rolls it. Then all of a sudden your plans may completely go out the window.
And then I wanted to break into, we talked about starting the show. I've talked, if you've ever seen my talk at a convention, I talked about that 30 minutes beforehand of setting up cameras and everything. And that's when we kind of do the last minute things of, okay, players, I'm trying to get to this place. So, help me get us there. And that's when you confirm details with your producer you want to go through and make sure that there'll be cues and these things are set up that you're expecting to happen. Just go through it again. Even if your producers tested them, or even if I test them, I do a mental checklist. It's like, are these things going to happen? Can I hit this button? Do I still have that button there where I expect it to be when I need to, put it on a music cue or have something, or have confetti appear on the screen, right? And so we talk about the start of the show, and we talk about during the show, and then we get to the end of the show where we have time for wrapping up. And a quick aside to this is that when you start the show, say it's a 2-hour show, which is kind of average-ish in a way, 3 hours, 2 hours, 3 hours in there. Part of your time, you got to figure at least 10 minutes of your time is for player intros, your intro and player intros, and then maybe another 5 minutes or so for a recap. Then you have your story, and then you need time at the end to not only get your story, but let your players have outros. I'm a big believer in people being able to plug themselves afterwards as well. So you're still going to need 5 minutes at the end to do that. How much ever time you took at the beginning, you're going to need that time at the end for all your outros and, say come back next week.
So yeah, when you're talking about timing, one thing you really want to think about, and we had this kind of informally, but also formally during every episode of Rivals, which is what is our run of show? When do we, how are things going to lay out? We didn't necessarily have them down to the minute, but we understood that we were going to, you know, it was streamed in the moment. So we were going to start the stream. We had to run any ads. Then we had an actual intro happen. And during that time is when we were behind the scenes with each other doing like the thumbs up to each other. Um, Knowing we were going to each quickly introduce ourselves. And I cannot remember if we did outros. It's been a while since we played. Sadly, I miss them. But knowing that you're going to do all of those things ahead of time, because as the person who is running and writing the story, all of those things are going to chip away at the amount of time that you have to tell the story. So you really do want to know that ahead of time.
And yeah, and then going back to the end of the show, as a producer, you also have to put the outro. Like if you have an end video, how long is that? Because you're going to want to hit stop recording, so you have the editor has less to edit out at the end. Or maybe you got to do a lot, so make sure that outro has a loop to it, so that if you're doing multiple things to kind of shut down, people still have something to watch, and you can go, oh, I missed the first time, let me run it again and stop. So having that extra little bit in there is just for your sake as a producer, and timing and cutting things out and the edit. And so, did you have any other thoughts on this? Because this is basically Showtime time. And
Yeah, I think from I mean, I can speak more from the player and occasionally the DM side, and it's really the same thing. Having the expectations out there, and doing it's a lot different doing a one shot versus doing a series, whether that series is 4, 3, or 10 episodes. You eventually get into that flow and that structure as you go, but from the ground up, it's almost like you when you do a session zero, which you would normally do for a TTRPG group anyway, you almost also need like a rehearsal of your tech. And that if you're going to do multiple episodes, you need that to happen at a time that is at least, a week or two before you're going to record or stream, just so everyone has time to get everything down, understand which technology you're using, how you're going to use, how you're going to do captions, if at all. Essentially, a lot of the things that DC has discussed on TTRPG production in the past, you need that test session for tech, just like you need that session zero for the game. And that's where you, as the DM, and sometimes the DM is also the producer can set expectations for here's when the queues might happen and here's the options that we have. And there may be different ways to handle breaks. It may be that I know there's a for us, for Rivals, for our show, we just sort of had a very informal, like, if you have to get up for something and the spotlight's not on you in this moment, because we had a cast of 6 people. If the spotlight's not on you for this moment, just mute your microphone and go. It's fine because you're not detracting anything and we don't have to stop the whole stream for it. But depending on, we had things for tech issues, we had things for if we have to stop and take a break. I think all of that, if you establish it up front, and then everyone knows, okay, here's the expectation for this, with the caveat that in real time, when the plane is flying, if you have to make repairs while you're in the air, you just do. And sometimes it's going to happen.
All right. Thank you for all that. And thank you for the idea for
Yeah, well, I mean, the thing is, you've talked a lot about the setup, you've talked a lot about the structure, and this. I'm kind of curious what questions will come out of this, because
Mhm.
this is a lot of this is from the production side and how to get things ready. I'm very curious what kind of questions and perspectives will come from player side, from the GM side, when the GM is not the producer, which, if you are lucky
Mhm.
enough to have a producer for your show like we did, consider yourself blessed because it was fantastic.
Yes, if you can get a producer, do it, and hire me. But
That part, yeah.
that part. So we were talking about kind of the production side of things, and there's a lot of different ways you can approach an actual play. If you want some of the more character type things and player type things, Chaotic Wholesome Presents runs the table talk show every Tuesday. I highly recommend checking out their things because they often talk about player behavior at the table and those sort of expectations. So here's a link to that specific playlist on their YouTube. So please check those out if you want yet another perspective on all this, because this is, I mean, I can't cover everything, obviously. This is just kind of more the tech stuff and timing and that concern. But if you want player behavior and more in depth on that, go check out Chaotum Wholesome Presents. And all right, we had a couple questions on this.
We did. We were talking when you were talking about world building, which I believe you kind of covered that in your first video about this. Vancouver by Night on Twitch had a question for us both when it comes to determining our world, and it was, do we like random tables for determining what's in a city?
If that's what you need to do and you're comfortable with it, go for it. Whatever tool is good for you. Sly Flourish does the lazy DM things. Look at those books. There's a lot of tables in there, and just have them done ahead of time. Just don't do them during the session. But if this town has, and you roll it, and write down what you get, and do it ahead of time. But yeah, that's fine.
Mhm. Yeah, I think random tables are great. I know some people who have like they have several D100 tables for things that may happen at any given time, but it's the kind of thing where I would definitely do it ahead of time, similar to the random tables that they give you when you're building characters. And they would say, you know what, if you don't know what your personality is, roll a D12 and pick one. The only time I like random tables in the moment is when we're doing something like a chase scene. And that's just to pick one from a bunch of random funny things that may happen during the chase. Um, but yeah, I think random tables can be a great tool because sometimes you just cannot think of something and also the reason I like random tables is when you roll the die and you see what the option is, it really tells you whether or not you didn't know because you may say, "Oh no, definitely not that. What it actually is this." Yeah.
Or you do something like for random effects, as Herb was saying, like have a spinning wheel that happens on stream
Don't
that
don't do that.
that maybe has
Don't do
three
that. I
fireballs on it,
don't do that. You
and
added so many fireballs to that. There were so many fireballs
there
on
was
that
only
wheel.
three.
Yeah, and somehow I feel like you unfairly weighted it behind the scenes because those fireballs came up a lot.
They did, and that made me happy, but it wasn't expected.
And you would think fire during a cooking challenge is great. Not always.
Talking about
Oh,
the
goodness.
last charity stream I did, which was a parody of Iron Chef, and I found a spinny wheel thing, and for a donation, we would spin the wheel, and it happened to come up Fireball a lot.
Yeah. And we had an additional question, which is coming back to the session, the information we talked about today when it was timing and intros for players or characters. And the Lurking Writer on Twitch asks, what are our thoughts on having player or character info during the breaks, in addition to the intros and outros?
Yeah, that's a good idea. If you have it set up for a little video, maybe have character art, and you have the little stats come up, and you have each character fade in and out during the break, or even as part of your maybe part of an intro, you just have the various character art appear. It's not just a title screen; it's the character art. But yeah, putting that into breaks is an excellent idea to keep people up. Also, what I would like to do on if I did a series again is have that have a command available in chat that would also bring up that information for people.
Yeah. I like having that as a chat command. I also when speaking of Chaotic Wholesome Presents, when they did the God Plane during our breaks, there were scenes that would pop up with our character art, the name, pronouns, and class, and we. I'm sorry, no, I didn't inject this yet because we talked about the new OBS Elgato plugin that lets you transfer lets you transfer scenes. When it comes to making TTRPG overlays, there is sort of a one good thought of how you make them, which is fill the entire screen with your faces. But there's also a thought to leave enough space like on the side for you to have a rotating thing that may have character art and stats and things like that while you're actively playing the game. Um, so that is something that is great because then you may not always have to spend time on that. Also, you don't have to cover it again when somebody says, "Oh, wait, they're a sorcerer, but what's their subclass or what's their level or who?" Yeah. So yeah.
Yeah, like when I did a show, uh, when I had a regular series, the layout was I was over in the on the left side of the screen, and I was up, up a bit, and then I had four players. They were on the other side, and then below me was their character art and their kind of stat blocks fading in and out, and then below that we had kind of a lower third area. Like I have my chat area down here that you see pop up, and then that brought up different things that faded in and out for the channel, like sponsors and websites to go to, and other information that just for the channel was needed, upcoming things, things like that. So you had a lot of different things, and you just kind of section up your screen for the various things. Lower thirds, and then, like I said, I had a space for character art and little stat blocks to pop up as well.
So yeah, I think during the breaks, those are great things to do. And also when I'm going to be in something, generally the person who's doing the producing or the GM will ask like, "Hey, is there anything you want to promote?" In this age, give me a 16 by 9 image, and it will go on the starting up soon and the BRB. So yeah, um, and Lurking Writer mentions that you're watching a series where the players have created in-universe ads. That's a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm.
That helps build out the world for the viewer and also lets the players inject a little bit more of themselves into the world. So that's a lot of fun.
And I suppose going back to our conversation, that's another thing to think about is during Showtime is layout of the screen. Where are things going? What's happening in those spaces other than the people and their names? And is that name rotating between their name or their handle and their player name, or is it just static? Or what do you have? And you can set all that up in OBS to do that. Maybe that's another show idea is how I'd set up an overlay. Hmm. Hmm.
Hmm.
Hmm.
Hmm. I
Might
don't
be an
know. Yeah.
idea.
Hmm.
Hmm.
Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah.
Well, we got to stop giving ourselves work.
Yeah. Example, blue milk, all a growing farm boy needs. Whether they're dusting crops or shooting womp rats in their T16, blue milk. Don't ask what we melt. Amazing. Zero,
Truly.
you may know a guy who knows overlays. Ooh, let's see here. So if I did the show, Zero, what you're saying is that there is someone I could have on as a guest who would talk about overlays with me.
See, the funny thing is, I told DC that he should have on people who actually know stuff for these TTRPG AP assemble things, but he asked me instead. So, like, all right, whatever. Um, but yeah, I think when we both looked at the new Elgato plugin, and I was thinking like, I don't want to standardize necessarily what people use, but if somebody were a prolific overlay maker, we might just happen to know one in chat, and they said, okay, I will, here's your options. Here's your basic option for like 5 people, 4 people, 6 people, two and two, a one, with art on it, that kind of thing. And when it goes back to talking about cues for your players, um, and it's weird because if you have a separate GM and producer, like they can kind of communicate on their own. But I will also say a lot of times the people who are on the stream are not watching the stream. So if the producer is doing fun stuff with their cameras or like we can't necessarily watch it, some people will let you see what they see in OBS, and that's great. But yeah, those are also cues you want to set up to say, like, okay, well, if I'm doing a one-on-one with you as the GM, what's going to happen on screen is there's just going to be a picture of you and me. So everybody else who's not in that, if that's when you need to like have a drink of water or move your cat out of the way of the background or go like deal with something in the house, like that's a great time for you to do that because you're not even going to be on screen.
Yeah, great. All right. Any other thoughts regarding this? Otherwise, that's a good point to wrap this segment up in.
I already made you talk way too long as it was. So yeah. No, I just think, yeah, like again, when it comes down to timing for when it comes down to like you're getting to the level of, okay, you've got all these things set up, you're about to start talking about streaming or recording your actual play, let everybody know what their time commitment is going to be. And that is the easiest way to get buy-in from everybody who's involved in the production. If they know exactly how much time this is going to take every time we sit down, it's golden.
Oh, and something I wanted to bring up to kind of wrap this up with as well is that producers, at the end of the stream, when you hit stop recording and you're off the call, build in time for you to take a break after everything's done. Like, have that part of your mental timing for things. Say the show ends at 3 o'clock. you're not doing anything else until 3:10, right? Like give yourself 10 minutes or something after the show, or 15 or 20, however long you think you need. But build that in and don't do anything. Just take a break. Give yourself time to decompress. And, players and GMs and everyone, I hope you're doing that too. But as a producer, you're shutting things down, make sure everything's off. Everything that you need reset to keep working on the day is done. And just take a breath, take a break.
I think it's easy to forget. It's very easy to forget that the producer, while they are not on screen, they are not acting for 2 to 3 hours. They are vigilantly watching everything else. And anybody who is a streamer knows what I'm talking about. They are watching how everything looks. They're making sure that the scenes are right. They're making sure that the internet hasn't, like their internet hasn't crapped out. They're making sure that Zoom hasn't decided to all of a sudden do something really weird in the middle of everything. They're focused and locked in. And I think maybe people forget just how much work you're actually doing, even though you're not playing in the game. So, yeah, definitely take a little time for yourself. Like, flip the thing to closed and, like, just no, that's it.
Give yourself some grace. All right, and that's where we'll wrap up part 3 of the series. Yay! That was